Hi, my name is Kaya from Nordic Approach, and welcome to this virtual cupping. I'm here with our head of buying and procurement, Joanne, and we are going to cup some coffees from Honduras. So Joanne, would you mind telling us a bit what we're cupping today and what kind of coffees these lots represent?
So we're cupping coffees from Moises and Mary Isabel. We have a number of plots of land in Marcala in Honduras. We have a range of 4 different coffees. We have a washed coffee from the farm El Pantanal. We have a natural coffee from cherries collected from a number of the different farms, and which we have carried the name Bomba de Fruta over to make sure people know it's full of fruit. And we have an extended fermentation, fermented natural, where the cherries have been fermented before the coffee's been dried. And then we have an anaerobic Geisha.
Let's cup.
Great.
So, what's the first coffee that we'll be cupping? Or the coffee number one?
The first coffee is the Caballero El Pantanal, which is one of the farms that we've been buying from Mary Isabel and Moises for quite some time now. And it's always consistently tasting great, in my opinion. Very stable coffee.
For me, it's a very fresh and quite like green fruit driven coffee. Some pear, green apples, but for me also a bit of kiwi. Some roasted hazelnuts that gives it this like very nice creamy texture. And a very like, not light, but delicate and nice acidity, like malic apple like acidity.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, especially with the acidity. It's this very like malic and acidic, but in a very soft way, which also allows it to have this really nice mouthfeel, just very sweet and balanced and very easy to drink. I think it's not offensive or abrasive in any way. I say that those words are a little intense, but I like acidic coffees, so it's nice to also point out the coffees that are not always so acidity driven and have other characteristics that come to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it's as harmonious with this, because it's not often you see the mouthfeel gets exaggerated or being heightened thanks to the acidity. It's often the other way around, I find.
Yeah, it's a great tasting coffee.
Yeah. And coffee number 2?
So number 2 is a natural. It's very important for naturals that the cherries are very ripe in order to have high sugar in the cherry for the natural processing. So Moises takes volumes that are ripe from different parts of or different plots of land that they have, all in the same area. You can walk between them quite easily. So it's not one of the farms, let's say, or one of the plots of lands, but a combination of cherry from a couple of them. And I think what's really interesting about this is that traditionally we've done a lot of washed coffees from Honduras, as we've been working with Mary Isabel and Moises since 2012 and known them even longer. So naturals are a relatively new addition. And it's also a hard environment to produce naturals because Honduras has a lot of humidity and a lot of rain during the drying season. So initially when we asked Moises, oh, can we please have more naturals? He was like, Joanne, why do you want this from me? This is difficult. And he was a little apprehensive, but he's done such an amazing job over the last years of producing these naturals and really seen them get better and better. So for me, this is just a very good example of a fruit-driven coffee, but not fermented, very sweet and balanced, and represents fruit and fruit forwardness very well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's cool that you say this about that it demands such ripe cherries because you can really taste it. It's this super sweet, ripe fruit in the cup that is just so pleasant. And it's not that like very red, over fermented fruit. It's much more towards like a really ripe nectarine or peachy almost, because it has some of those lighter, more acidic attributes. So it's a fruity coffee, but it's still so sweet and elegant.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great example of a well-processed natural.
Yeah. How would you recommend that one would use this coffee?
We have seen some of our clients use naturals like this as great espressos, even though that could be a little surprising in some coffee drinking markets. I think they can make great espressos, especially when they're very balanced, like this natural is, not too acidity driven or wild in the fruit. I think it can make a really good espresso, but I would also be happy drinking this as a filter coffee or a brewed coffee.
And coffee number 3.
So this coffee is from Las Lomas, which is one of the plots of lands or farms the Caballeros own. So it's the Caballero Las Lomas. And what's unique about this coffee is that it's an extended fermentation coffee. So what that means is that the cherries are picked and they are put in grain per bags right after being picked for 3 days and just left to ferment. And then after that, the cherries are dried on the patio. So what we found in other parts of the world is when we take cherries and we don't process them immediately, but we actually let them sit for some time, the fermentation that happens in this process develops a very specific kind of fruit flavor in the coffee. It tastes very almost like synthetically fruity, like a candy, or it's not the same as like a natural processed coffee where the cherries are just immediately put out to dry. And I mean, it varies a little bit depending on how long you're fermenting the cherries, of course, depending on the climate you're operating in, whether it's hot or cold, this kind of thing will have an impact on the results. What Moises told me when I spoke to him about these coffees were what they found with the cherry fermentation is that 3 days was the best time frame to ferment the cherries for. If they fermented for less time than this, he said that he found the impact on the flavor was not enough almost to make it worthwhile. So the 3 days for them in the environment that they're operating in was really critical. And I think we see those flavors in the cup quite dominantly. Indeed. What did you think about the cup or the taste of it?
It's a totally different profile because it's fun because for me, coffee is sometimes like, or when I taste coffees, they come out as a color. If that makes sense. Like some coffees can be really red in the fruit, some coffees can be really yellow. Whereas this is like golden in a way, like barbecued pineapple and like mango or like heat treated mango with like fresh raspberries on top. It's incredibly intense, but so structured.
I think your descriptor there of the barbecued pineapple, that's like spot on for me. I didn't come up with it myself, but when you said it, I'm like, yeah, she's got it. That was so good. And for me, it's that kind of like candy-like sweetness. And again, I would say like almost synthetic like fruit flavors that come out of these more processed coffees.
Yeah, like sugar-coated, heat-treated fruit.
Yeah.
Or like Turkish delights, or yeah, it is very candy-like. That's amazing. And it would be, I mean, for me, it would be so interesting to taste coffees that were fermented 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. I don't know. Because as you say, it clearly impacts the cup from the regular natural to the extended fermentation. It's an ocean between the two of them for me.
It is absolutely, and we have done that in some cases with some suppliers who are willing to do more of these kind of small experiments for us. What I would say is it's very hard you have to control a number of different elements. So time is one thing, but also the temperature of the environment. And sometimes it's not possible to control that. So coffees processed like this versus coffees processed like this in Colombia will have a different impact. So the final coffee we're cupping is a Geisha. It's also actually anaerobically processed, so not the same as other coffees in process, but a very specific process for our offering. And of course, a Geisha is not a coffee or variety that we indulge in too often. The Geishas are great tasting coffees, but as a varietal, they're very tough to produce for producers. They take a lot of additional effort and care and inputs, and they also don't have a very high yield. So in terms of sustainability or the economy of most producers, they're not a coffee that people often or make very much money off of, even though they are quite expensive, as you will see on our offer list. But I have to say, this coffee really, for me, it's been outstanding when we've cupped it, and here I am today. I think it's very distinctive and really well represents the flavor characteristics you can get from this variety.
Absolutely. It's incredibly, I mean, for me, it's just very floral, almost like rose water and some hibiscus. And it has that like red fruit underneath that is just so refreshing. Reminds me of one of these like sparkling pet nut wines, because it has that vividness to it.
Yeah, I think the beauty for me is, like you say, these kind of flavor characteristics that are there. I also get a lot of like passion fruit, but also the distinctiveness of those characteristics. It's like so clear with your tasting and what's there, the kind of florals and the fruits. And I think that makes it like very intense and amazing coffee to cup. This Geisha was, as I said, processed anaerobically, which means that the cherries are picked and they're put inside a closed barrel that has like a valve, airlock valve that allows the gases to come out. And first, when the barrel is closed, of course, there will be a little bit of air that's pushed out by the gases as the cherries ferment. So that's how the anaerobic coffees are processed.
Amazing. Oh, good coffees.
Yeah, so great to be working with Mary's Bell and Moises. They are one of our longest producing partners, and we have really evolved with them over time. We have seen them be able to produce different kinds of coffees, and also just very solid, stable coffees across the board. So both the washed coffees that we've been working with for the longest, one of the greatest things about the coffees from them have been that they're so stable and consistent, and they last like over a year. And we've seen similar results with the naturals and the experimental fermentations. So very happy to have all these coffees on the offer list this year.
Yeah, they're amazing. An amazing couple, like the sweetest people.
Yeah, the nicest people you can meet.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Joanne, for your time. This was such a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me too. So thank you so much, Kaya.
Amazing. And for you who's watching, if you like these style of coffees, you can go to our offer list and search for or look for the coffees from Markala, because that's the region where these come from. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time.